So welcome to, I believe this is episode 8, hard to believe,
Wow.
of Flyside Chats. And today, this evening, I have Morgan Lyle with me, and I'll let Morgan introduce himself. Go ahead, Morgan.
Hi, Anthony. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you.
I'm a Tenkara guy like yourself, and I'm the author of this book, Tenkara Today. And while I'm pitching books, I'm also the author of Simple Flies.
Facebook.
And I live in New York City, and I like fishing pretty much the same way you do, and it's great to be here with you.
Awesome. So, in addition to those books, I know you've written for some magazines too, right?
Yep, yep. Done quite a few magazine articles over the years.
But the question I've been putting to folks to start these off is, we had a I can't speak for everyone, but a lot of people had a really crappy year last year as far as traveling goes, and and I know a lot of us really look forward to the fishing year, and we plan our our summers and our springs and falls around that, and really got messed up. So, um, looking forward to the new year, what kind of things are you looking forward to doing? If it's whether it's new stuff or just getting back to some places you've been or whatever.
It's getting back to the places I like. And I did do some fishing last year. I eventually came to the conclusion that, that going fishing by yourself is pretty responsible and pandemic friendly activity. So I got to some of my usual haunts and I can't wait to get back to them. Haven't made any plans to travel yet this year. Might, we'll see how things go. It'd be nice to maybe visit Colorado or something like that. But yeah, I'm going to be in the Catskills and Western New England, the places I'm usually at, and on the beach. Last fall, I sort of rediscovered beach fishing after a long
Okay.
time. And I used to be really into it for a certain period when I moved like to downstate New York and lived near the coast. Um, and it's really cool. It's a very fun thing. It's certainly not a fixed line thing. You'd use a regular fly rod, but I do enjoy it. It's a really
Yeah.
interesting game with its own rules, very different from trout fishing.
Yeah. So are you when you're doing that? Are you're on the beach? Are you in a boat? What are your?
I'm on the beach.
Yeah.
When I first moved to Long Island, a guy told me one from the beach is better than 10 from a boat.
Huh. Well, that's really cool. So, I lived in Maine for a while, and I went to grad school in Maine. So I was a poor college student, and I couldn't afford saltwater fly fishing gear. I had a 5 weight trout rod, and I tried casting that on the beach once, and that was a no go. I couldn't
Yeah.
punch that against the wind. But I would go out. I lived right for so when I first moved from like September through May, I lived right on the beach. You can rent these beach houses for like nothing, in the off season. So I lived right on the beach and would go out and catch stripers with my ultralight spinning gear. So I had like a little, probably like a 6 foot, ultralight trout rod. I would put like a big daredevil on it and go and catch these schoolies. I
Yeah.
never caught 50 pounders, but I would catch a 24-inch bass, in the ocean on a ultralight spinning rod was something that, was pretty fun, you know.
Absolutely. Yeah. I don't catch 50-pound fish either, or even 20-pound fish. Um, I guess I've caught a few decent sized ones now and then, but sheer dumb luck. But it's mostly schoolies, but they're great, man.
Yeah,
Schoolies on a fly
well,
rod are tremendous.
it's awesome. Yeah. So are you, what kind of, what kind of gear are you using for that? What weight rod and everything?
Generally, I've used 8 and 9 weight rods. And my beach rod is old and beat up, and I'm gonna invest in a new one this spring. I'm going with the 10 weight. I used it last year. I did go out on with a guy on a boat, and this particular model of rod, it's the TFO Mangrove. I liked it a lot. I really liked how it cast. The 10 weight, just I felt like I could get a good long cast out of it, and I just liked the way it performed. I think it'd be good for the beach.
Yeah, cool. So what are you, what kind of flies do you use for that?
Uh, you don't need a huge, well, you usually don't need a huge selection. So bucktail deceivers and jiggies are the two flies I dig the most. And, which is the equivalent of regular deceivers and Clouser minnows, right? But
Okay.
I love those Bob Popovic's flies. They're fun to make and fun to use, very effective.
So,
Yep.
so you mentioned Catskills. And,
Yeah.
so is that kind of when you're looking to get some mountain streams? That's where you,
That's where I go. I'm from that area
okay.
originally. I was born and raised in Kingston, New York, and my first fishing was on Esopus Creek in
Oh,
the
okay.
Eastern Catskills, and I absolutely love it. And by the way, just fabulous Tenkara water. Most of the creek is pocket water, although there are some good sized pools on it too. But it's different in character from, say, like the Delaware River, which has really long, flat pools, and
Yeah.
Tenkara is of more limited value there. The Esopus is fabulous for it, man. It's just millions of little wild trout hiding behind millions of rocks and all kinds of cool pocket water and stuff. It's really cool.
Have you ever the one thing that fascinates me about New York is the spring creeks on, like, is it on Long Island? There's those spring
Yeah,
creeks. Have you ever fished in those or seen
I
those?
have. I have a fair amount of experience with them because I lived pretty close to them.
Okay.
Very interesting, ecosystems. There's, it's not your typical high gradient, stony, rushing trout stream. They're very placid. They're usually pretty shallow. The bottoms are generally, gravel that big, pea-sized gravel. You could ride a bike in most of them. The bottoms are so smooth and level. And they're not draining watersheds at all, So you could get an inch of rain overnight, and the next day your creek won't have come up at all.
Yeah.
It's just the water that comes up out of the ground, and 5 miles later it meets the ocean. But they're really beautiful. I mean, fabulously rich environments. The hatches are just tremendous. Literally one of the best green drake / brown drake hatch / spinner falls I know of anywhere occurs in a coastal spring creek in Long Island.
Wow.
And it's pretty reliable, and the fishing is just off the hook. Really nice. And they have, and they're stocked pretty liberally, and you can catch some pretty nice fish there. But they also have, at least especially in the river that I enjoy the most, heritage strain wild brook trout.
Oh, really?
Yep.
Nice.
Really
Nice.
cool.
Yeah, yeah. Most of the the limestone streams here in PA, there are some that still have the brookies, but most of the spring creeks have been taken over by the browns.
Sure.
There's
Yeah.
still a few. So you mentioned hatches, and I haven't really talked about that with the other folks. Are there hatches? For me, the hatch that I hate to miss, and I try to get there if I can, is the sulfur hatch.
Sure.
In central PA. That's the one that I've had the most luck on. It's the first hatch I probably ever fished successfully. The kind of thing where you can stand in one place and catch 30 fish.
Yeah.
So are there hatches that for you like that you have that you really plan around getting to?
I've always loved isonychias, and they've never really been a blanket hatch in most places, but there's always a few around on the rivers where they live. And I mentioned Esopus Creek. That's definitely one of them. Farmington River, and I guess the Housatonic too in New England. And I just really like that fly a lot. For one thing, it's a hatch that you can fish in very different ways. Because those nymphs are such good swimmers, you could do a lot of swinging and stripping of a nymph and catch that way. And certainly dry flies will work. So it's just a long hatch. It could start as early as late May, and they're still around in October. But again, no massive emergences all at once, or at least that I've ever seen. They just tend to be around. The sulfurs, I always think, when I think of sulfurs, I think of like the branches of the Delaware River. And, the hatch goes on for a month, and the fish are eating them, all afternoon, that whole time. And if you want to catch any of them, you better have the right fly, because for that entire time, that's the only thing that means food to those trout,
Right,
is
right.
that size 18 sulfur.
Yeah, that's the one when folks talk about Tenkara one fly or whatever very limited fly selection. That's the thing I always think of are there's a sulfur hatch on like Spring Creek, and I haven't had luck with anything else when that's going on, and I would love, it's like one of those things where I'd love to get, I would love to see a Tenkara expert, someone who really see what they could do, because I have the same kind of feeling as you. Is those fish are so keyed in, it's like they forget that anything else is food.
Exactly.
And before the hatch, like like you would swear there's not a fish in the stream. I could fish all afternoon, not catch anything. It's like they're waiting, for that emergence, and then they start eating. And so yeah, I always, and at other times for some of those other when I'm out in the driftless in May, for instance, there's a lot of different things going on. And even in Pennsylvania in like early May, there's a bunch of different caddis, there's different mayflies. So there is a lot of different things. And I think when that's happening, a lot of then the general Tenkara stuff works for me really well, because they're just kind of they're not specialized, but
Right.
those specialized hatches, yeah, they really seem to focus. Have you fished the you mentioned the Isonychia, um, how it moves a lot. Have you fished like have you tried fishing actively like with like Tenkara style flies while that's happening?
Sure. And and yes, I guess I have had, put it this way, I've had luck with like Kabari that would be, about roughly imitative of an Isonychia, a size 12 or even 10, kind of a dark body and a dark soft tackle of some kind. Probably more often I've had success with nymph shaped flies as opposed to wet fly flies, but that may just be happenstance, But yeah, I, I, I think they work pretty well.
Interesting. So I know a lot of people love your book. I love your book. Do
Oh,
you have
thanks.
any plans? Do you have any other book plans that you're hatching?
No books in the work. No, I'm thinking maybe I should write a book called Complicated Flies and just
Complicated
go
books.
completely from the other
Go the
direction,
other way.
But
Yeah, I have to break that book out again and really look because I haven't tied anything. I have that thing where I'll tie so many flies, and sometimes I look at this crap and I hate to admit it, I'll toss stuff because I'm never going to use it. you know
yeah, I
so
know. Yeah, I'm my all my stuff is right there. There's 200 or 300 flies sitting in my little what do you call it, sling pack right next to me here, and
yes,
I'm never going to touch most of them, but I'll tie more anyway.
right, yeah. And so like having a book so what I do in order to like rein myself in is I'll crack open a book and pick a specific fly, and then I'll tie that fly, and at least I know I'm tying something that's got some hope of being a good fly. So just something I made up.
Well, I've seen an awful lot of your flies, and every single one of them has hope, so I wouldn't worry about that. But yeah, it's funny. I used to, in one place where I lived years back, there was an older guy who was a real mentor to me for a while. He related to me once a conversation he was having with someone else about some good fishing he'd had. He was catching fish after fish. His fly was working really well. And so he changed flies. And the person he was talking to said, "You were catching fish. Why'd you change flies?" And he said, "I wanted to see what else they would take."
Right, right.
Part of the fun sometimes.
I definitely in over longer term cycles that happens to me. Like when I when I got into Tenkara, I was fishing a lot of the limestone spring creeks, and Tenkara took me back to the mountain streams. And then lately, I've gotten back to the limestone streams because I kind of got, I don't want to say bored, but I was so familiar with the streams I was going to. I just wanted another change. So I got back to that. And that really kind of reinvigorated me to go down that path. And I've been exploring like the Euro nymphing stuff. And the cool thing is it reminds me what I like about Tenkara, and that is the rejected the idea of simplicity for simplicity's sake for a long time because I thought I didn't like Tenkara for that reason. But going back to rod and reel, now I do like it for that reason. And thinking about all this rigging, I got maybe 3 different reels with different lines on them for different situations, different leaders. And then I go back to Tenkara, and it's such a breath of fresh air.
Yeah, yeah. I know what you mean. Fly fishing is a lot of fun. I'm going to do more of it in the trout streams this year too, but it is kind of fussy, especially when you know how well you can do without all that
Right,
stuff.
right. And I just want to say that I really appreciate you being with me here, Morgan, and taking time out of your day to do that. And thanks a lot. So
Oh yeah, thank you, Anthony. It's a
yeah,
lot of fun. I'm honored to be here. And no, I don't have much to say except that you and I ought to go fishing sometime.
yes,
And if you don't mind, I want to plug something
yeah,
else. I
yeah,
just
yeah.
finished a book, um, this book, East Branch by Mitch Keller.
Okay,
Quick read, but such a nice book. And it's about a guy who was I guess at the time he was maybe in his mid 20s or early 30s, and he lived in New York City, and he moved up to the Catskills to be a trout bum for 6 years. And it's just him telling that story, and it's really beautifully done. And I think especially if you're familiar with that part of the world, but if you're familiar with fly fishing and you've ever thought about getting away from it all and becoming a trout bum, he did it, and he tells you what it's like, both the good and the bad. Nice job.